Hi, I'm Jeremy Caius, Chief Financial Officer for Kyrene School District, and on today's 10-minute talk, we're going to look at the bond legislation and the 3-year history that it took to get the bond legislation into place, starting with rolling some videos from the legislature.
I went to Speaker Adams and President Pierce at the beginning of the session and said, would you mind if we ran a bill early on, instead of waiting to the budget, so that school districts would know what, and charters, what flexibility they're going to have before July, before August. And both of them said, oh, absolutely, let's do it. Put quite a few things in there. The two biggest things, though, that I wanted, we had to pull out. And that was Class B bonding. And you'll see that come up as the governor's office asked that that be part of the budget at the end. And when I say Class B bonding, what I'm talking about is we have taken away the ability for school districts to bond for maintenance and repairs, most of their capacity, because we told them that we will pay for that from now on. Well, about 4 years ago, we stopped paying for any maintenance and repairs. So it's not fair that we've taken away their capacity and we've stopped paying. Right now, if a school has a major catastrophic incident at their school, pretty much M&O is the only place they can take it from. Teacher salaries where they have to, for that broken water pipe or something like that. So we want to give back some capacity. That's going to be in the budget. The other piece.
So Senate Bill 1263 was successful and did pass downtown. However, after it passed, the bond lawyers decided that it was unconstitutional and considered special legislation since it only limited bond sales to districts who already had an authorization in place and didn't give other districts an opportunity to go out for a bond sale. And because of that, we had to go back downtown in the following year and try once again to get some bond legislation passed.
House Bill 2405 temporarily increases the bonding capacity limits for non-unified school districts from 5% to 10% of the district's net assessed value, and from 10% to 20% for unified school districts.
Wasn't this passed last year, some sort of this whole iteration of bonding?
Madam Chair, Representative Crandall, you heard last year Senate Bill 1263, which dealt with the same issue, but it had, among other issues, but it had a date of April 15th that was deemed somewhat problematic, which will be discussed further.
We did pass this out last year, and with the implementation of the April 15th date, the bonding authorities were hesitant to issue the bonds. This fixes that problem, and the staff covered it very well.
My understanding is that everybody got a gym, but if you wanted a swimming pool, you bonded above that. Correct? I mean, if you were just basically looking at it, so that everybody had the same facilities, and some school districts who chose to, whose communities could afford it, would bond up to have addition over and above.
This was a bill that we passed out last year. Passed the House, passed the Senate, was signed by the governor, and then certain bond attorneys in Arizona said, oh, we think the language is not as clear as it needs to be, so here we are back over again.
Mr. Chair, members, House Bill 2405, as you said, raises the bonding capacity for school districts and common school districts, union high school districts from 5% to 10%, and unified high school districts from 10% to 20% of the school district's net assessed valuation levy.
20 plus years ago, when the state agreed to pay for all new construction and building renewal, we reduced capacity from 30% to 15% for unifieds and 20 to 10 for unions and elementaries. Problem is, we stopped paying for things many, many years ago, and so this is a bill to give back just a little bit of that capacity.
I'm Judy Richardson with Stone and Youngberg, but more importantly, I used to work for the state. I was at the Department of Education, the Senate, the governor's office, and the predecessor to the School Facilities Board, and was very heavily involved in the Students First lawsuit and the legislation. And I'd just like to disagree with Kevin McCarthy's interpretation. I don't believe that the debt limits were part of what was the Supreme Court required. If you read the Supreme Court decision, you will see that they explicitly said they wanted districts to go above and beyond what the state provided. So the decision to reduce bonding capacity was a political decision to reduce property taxes because the belief was that school districts wouldn't need to bond and raise money locally because the state was providing everything. And as has been mentioned, the problem is that the state is no longer providing anything and school districts have needs. And what I would like to also point out to you is that because these limits are so low, the districts that are hurt the most by the low limits are the poorest districts because they have the least bonding capacity. So in kind of a funny way, increasing the limits actually helps the lowest wealth districts because it gives them a little more capacity to meet their needs while the state has no money and is not able to give them any money for new schools or to repair and renovate their existing schools.
We made a promise 20 years ago that we would fund schools and renewal. And in exchange for that promise, we lowered the debt capacity for everyone across the state from 30 to 15 and 20 to 10. Here we are then many, many years later, we have not kept up our end of the bargain. We have no intention to keep up our end of the bargain going forward. The court case, we stopped funding equitably many, many, many years ago. If there were a court case that would have come forward, I heard a great saying the other day, every state has a state flower, state necktie, state school funding lawsuit. It's just the way it happens. That doesn't concern me one bit. What concerns me is that we have people moving into communities, those who have said yes on the bonds, and even if they went out to vote again, it wouldn't change. The issue is the capacity, not the voter approval. They have expectations of their schools. They want facilities for their schools. We went back on our word. This is a small step forward, Representative Stevens. I appreciate very, very much you bringing this back up again. We made a commitment. We have to keep that commitment. People have to be able to trust us when we say we're from the legislature, we're here to help. And we keep just throwing that back in their faces. And with that, I vote aye.
So House Bill 2405 never actually made it down to the floor for a final vote. So although it made it through most of the process, it never made it all the way through the process. And because of that, the bill died. And once again, we had to go into our third year of appealing to the state for some bond legislation.
These are the property tax changes that have occurred in the state of Arizona. You might look at those. If there was ever a bad time not to have a dramatic shift in property taxes and dramatically increased property taxes, it'd be now. We've had record increases in rates as a result of the collapse of the real estate market. The window you are creating to sell these bonds in the next 3 years is going to have a significant impact on that.
For the record, my name is Jeremy Caius, Chief Financial Officer for the Kyrene Elementary District, and I want to thank you for once again hearing this bill. I don't want to waste your time with speculation or hypothetical situations. I want to just give you the actual numbers of what this means. Kyrene has passed by a 70% vote a bond in 2010 authorizing the district to sell $116 million over 10 years. We've not been able to do that because of what's happened with property values. We have analyzed, since we will be one of the districts who will have one of the most immediate and significant impacts, we've analyzed what this will do to our tax rate. And in our peak year, it increases the tax rate by 2 cents. 2 cents in our peak year. So this thought and this notion of doubling tax rates, completely inaccurate from the truth. And I'm willing to share that data with anyone who would want to see it. Also, in addition to that, capital items are not like maintenance and operations items. If you don't pay someone a certain salary, you don't give them a raise, you reduce their compensation at the end of the year, that liability, that expense is gone. But if you don't repair a leaky roof, you don't go into the next year with a brand new fixed roof and, hey, guess what? We don't have to worry about that roof anymore. These projects have been building. Capital has been cut significantly year after year after year, and these projects are just mounting up. And in our school district, we have seen numerous disruptions to education because we have pipes that are bursting and flooding classrooms. We have other pipes that are bursting and leaving sewer gas smell within the district, and it's causing major disruptions to our education. So without addressing these facilities, trust me, our community would be willing to put in more than their 2 cents. So I want to thank you again for hearing this bill.
The fiscal note on this bill, I understand the speaker who spoke and said it's a couple of cents. That is contrary to what the JLBC has laid out. That's not a partisan number. That's just a number. That's the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, which estimates this to be up to $400 million. I simply cannot support that sort of a tax increase on our property owners.
But the state needs to fundamentally make a decision. Either the state is in the business of funding our capital construction through Students First, or please give the power back to the people in our local school communities to do what they feel that they need to do for their communities. So out of respect for the budget process, I appreciate you taking time and attention on this issue today, and I look forward to continuing this conversation through the budget process. Thank you.
This new sale adds 2 cents to that tax rate. So our peak year is increasing by 2 cents. And so that goes from the 91.93 to the 94.12 that you see up there.
So House Bill 2399 made it significantly through the legislative process and demonstrated that there was a need for the bond legislation. And so that language was rolled into the budget, which was supported by the governor and passed ultimately downtown. And now districts can finally sell those voter authorized bonds. And that is your 10-minute talk on the bond legislation.